Well, welcome everybody. This will be a fun conversation between the guys on the panel, and also we're going to bring the audience in as well towards the end. So make sure if anything piques your interest, you write down your questions, and we'll be sure to try and get to everybody's questions as easily as possible. We will talk a lot about the analytics of the game and also some current hockey issues, things that are pressing the league right now, and any questions that you might have as well. So I'm going to start it off with the Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins general manager Peter Chiarelli, since this is a Boston crowd. And Peter, you are recently you're the reigning general manager of the Stanley Cup champ. So first off, a lot of people consider baseball, a lot of statistics around baseball and the statistics of the players and the batters and the pitchers, but hockey is one of those sports where there are statistics involved. They're not as heavily dominant and prevalent as they are in baseball. But talk a little bit about what statistics as a general manager that you find important when you're looking at players and scouting players.
Well, first and foremost, scouting players, you automatically look, at least I do, look at the size, height and weight. You look at the goals, the points. Let me just focus a little bit on the weight. I've found over time that the weight of a player is a little more significant than the height. You always want a bigger player, not always, but you'd like to have bigger players. But I think if you're able to play at a certain weight with a lower center of gravity, that's important for us. So we actually stress that with our scouts. On that note, we in my former job with the Ottawa Senators, we had retained a professor of biology who did this study over a long period of time for the stats, height and weight of players that were entering the amateur draft, and he came out of it with weight being more important than height. And you take little snippets of that here and there, but I think there's some credence to that. And other statistics that we look at, at the pro level, we look at plus minuses. You look at time on ice. All the standard stats, and you try and look at them in the context of the situations the players are playing in. We try and regenerate these stats. We try and create events internally so that we can characterize situations and then put them into some type of statistical analysis too. You have to be careful how you use it, but it's another piece of information. For example, we try and use we put a matrix in the offensive zone and the defensive zone, and we characterize the quality of chances from those matrices, from those locations in the zones, chances for, chances against, and then you come up with a different type of plus minuses. Michael can speak to that later, but there's the expected plus minus, expected chances and whatnot. So we try and be a little progressive when we look at those statistics. It's obviously it's not as static a sport as some of the other sports. Where you can have the result A or result B. So, but the conventional stats we look at, and then you try and put them into the context of certain situations on the ice.
Well, you mentioned Michael. Michael, your research, of course, the goaltender statistics are always talked about, goals against, save percentage. So they are probably individually as a player the most talked about as far as numbers are concerned. What has your research showed you about that and the direct correlation to defense?
I think one thing that we have seen is really this question of whether teams can control the shots that they face. In particular, teams can control the average difficulty of shots they face. I think it falls under shot quality. It's a big point of contention, I think, among analysts. And I think, but the one thing I would note is I tend to believe that there is a difference that teams can control, but on average, those differences end up being small. And so what ends up being more important is whether teams can control the number of shots they face, not necessarily the average quality.
Brian, you have one of the youngest teams in the league, and obviously with the playoffs approaching, how do you gauge youth and experience and the significance of those two categories of gauging players?
Well, not very successfully right now. I think going to what Peter said, I think we all want to be cutting edge here. We will take any edge we can get as managers. If we get an edge on player personnel or a rating system or nutritional breakthrough or the CVAC system, which is a new training method, we're all going to grab it. And we're going to hide it from the other teams if we can do it. But there has not been a statistical breakthrough that I've seen that's effective in hockey. Baseball was made for this. But in hockey, I think statistics are more like a lamppost to a drunk. They're useful for support, but not for illumination. And so, to me, you look at plus minus. If you play on a horse shit team, you're going to be a minus player. It's that simple. And if you play a lot of minutes on a horse shit team, you're going to have a real bad plus minus rating. It's that simple. So to me, we keep getting these things. Everyone's looking for this breakthrough, for a Moneyball type breakthrough. When we read these grad students send me papers about how many do you get a year, Pete? Like 30?
30 or 40.
And someone, I don't read them, but someone on my staff does. Just in case there's something in there, we don't throw them away. We actually examine them to see. And I have yet to see anything that has value in terms of an alternative way or a more progressive way of evaluating players. We still do it, like Pete said, time on ice, penalty minutes, plus minus, all the things, height, weight. We do some testing of the top prospects in terms of explosive speed, obstacle course, the combine type stuff. But basically it comes down to we watch these guys play, we try to make a projection of what they're going to be when they grow up, and we draft them on that sequence.
You mentioned the plus minus stat. Is that more of a media stat? Is that more of a gauge that the media uses to get players or to try and exaggerate their point a little bit about in particular defensemen, or do you guys really look at that plus minus stat? You mentioned if you're playing on a bad team, it's going to be way very high. Yeah, I had to paraphrase.
No, it's the more you play, especially if you're a guy on a poor team, and you're the top shutdown D, and you're going to draw the top line every time you go on the ice, you're going to have a very poor plus minus. There's nothing you can do about that. You can play great, and you're still going to be a minus player. And that's why I say it. They're useful for support, not for illumination. To me, I go into an agent comes in and negotiate a contract and says, well, this guy's plus 40 the last 3 years. I'm like, yeah, and he's probably 6th on his team. They got a great team. They're all plus players. Like, do you have any minus players on your team, Pete?
Yeah, the one who got a hat trick last night.
So you have one minus player. Okay, so now Pete's got some good players, but our team, we got a lot of minus players. We're really struggling right now. And they're not all bad players, and yet they're all minus players right now. So, again, it has limited value. And also, I got to get this off my chest anyway. This whole Moneyball thing aggravates me anyway. So, you look at the Moneyball analysis, there's a couple things. First off, it's boring baseball. Like, there's no entertainment value to watching a guy work the pitch count and foul pitches off. It's horseshit. And second, nobody's ever won a championship with Moneyball. So, let's not all get worked up about Moneyball.
Oh, I'm worked up about it already. They don't fail to mention that they had 3 of the best pitchers in baseball, and the thing has just blown apart since that one magical season and run. And, I'm looking for the analytics that tell me which players are going to have chicken and beer in the clubhouse more than how they're going to play on the ice. And that's the way I think you should approach hockey. Peter's right, the physical evaluation is huge because you have to have physical traits to play the game properly, although there are obviously exceptions to the rule. When you're talking about weight, Pavel Datsuk's name doesn't come up, right? It's just one of those things where but measuring the biological data, I think, is critical, and the mental makeup, which is really the art form of scouting, finding guys that want to play, want to win, can work in the clubhouse with teammates is a far more elusive but critical part of the evaluation process, in my opinion. But, even with a statistical analysis in baseball, Carl Crawford didn't work out. J.D. Drew wasn't the best in the business. There's room for these analyses, and I think your drunken lamppost, and that's a good analogy for you, the drunken lamppost one, isn't it? But I think that's where I'm at on it. It's support. And the more you can continue to find rocks to turn over, but there's difficulty too in hockey if you're talking about a scoring chance. Who measures the scoring chance? The quality of the scoring chance, where it comes from. You really have to have somebody who knows what they're talking about and can give you an idea of the quality of that chance. I know the league has people every game measuring hits, face-off wins, and every one of those hits is of a different quality and of a different situation. Yeah. And every one of those face-offs is a different win. Did you get support from your wingers? Was the puck dropped properly? It's a far more elusive thing. A hit is a hit, although it might be a looping single or a line drive, but it's still, it's landed somewhere where somebody isn't. But
is a goal a goal?
The hits you're mentioning in our league, it varies from building to building. You go into some buildings, I'm not going to mention which ones, and you out-hit the team, and then you get the stat at the end of the period. This happens at TD North Arena sometimes. You get the stat, and you say, wait a second, it says we got out-hit in that period. You threw all the major hits, your team did, and you get the stat sheet, and so you wonder sometimes what they're watching. Sometimes you brush a guy off after he passes the puck, and you get credit for a hit. It's the same hit as a guy that thumps a guy into the boards and rattles his teeth, and they're both on the score sheet the same. That's really, I think the league, they've done a better job at standardizing the statistics, but there's still variations. You still get cheated on shots on net.
Shots on net, I agree, and hits too. You can go to some rinks where there might be 50 total hits in a game, 60 total hits, where really it was a no-hitter. So I agree. And shots on goal, I find myself, and I got to catch myself, I find myself, questioning all the time that they're not registering certain shots on goal. They are, and I applaud the efforts that the league has done, the real-time stats. If you look at the paper that's generated after a game on tracking every event in the course of a game, it's great, and we use it, and we all use it, but it varies from venue to venue as far as the hits and the shots, so we have to be careful there also.
And the scoring chances as well, Mike. I remember we've done games before where you've looked at the score sheet and said scoring chances. Who's counting these scoring chances? So somewhere along the line, there might be a discrepancy between what's actually happening and what the scoring chances are on the ice.
That's where I'm at with it. I think that's why I think it's important to control your own stats. I think Brian's stats and Peter's stats are more valuable by far than the stats that you get from a league perspective. You have your own people tracking hits, tracking scoring chances, and tracking where goals go in. I mean, I think that is I think that's something that hasn't been done enough, when goalies are giving up. Brian's had a problem with his goalies lately. Where are they coming in from him? Where are they going in? How are they coming in and scoring goals against a particular goalie can be, I think, of tremendous use, both to his team and to the opponents, tracking where this guy might be vulnerable.
That's a little of what we've done, and I don't think we've leveraged it enough, but you can go back with historical data, right? You can find out where the goals were scored, and then you can place a value on those areas, and those are the scoring areas. We all know what we think are the scoring areas.
Yeah, I mean, I can go even further. I presented a paper here last year where we actually made probability surfaces for the entire offensive zone. And we were able to map the league average probability for any of the 7 types of shots the league records. That said, there are some issues with that data. These guys won't mention locations, but Madison Square Garden, there's a real obvious bias there in the locations where the shots are recorded. And so statistically, you sort of have to average or to adjust for where those happen in order to make sure that you're getting those surfaces properly.
Tony, you transitioned from playing career, you've done some media work, and you're also coaching youth hockey teams and a high school team as well. What do you see as the biggest conflict that youth have when they're trying to advance to the next level? Something that maybe stands out at you that you try and teach them?
As far as statistically, it's pretty simple. At the high school level, it's basically goals and assists. We really don't track many more stats than that. the biggest thing for the kids at the high school level is comparing themselves to other players. You know what I mean? They want to look at themselves. Okay, I got this amount of goals, and this kid got the same amount of goals. I'm on the same level with him. No, you're not, and we all know that. The unfortunate thing we can't measure is heart and desire. You know what I mean? And that's what everybody seems to look for in a player, and I know I do at the high school level. Does the kid have a big heart? You know, going beyond height and weight. I know it's all important, but that is a huge factor. I think it takes kids a long way. Kids that could not play in the NHL do get there on heart alone.
And the size of your players, that they're going to vary, because that's a time in their lives when some kids are taller than others and bigger and stronger than others who haven't yet developed. So how do you accommodate for that? Because some guys might think they're not as good as the player next to them just because they haven't quite evolved physically.
We went through some stats at the end of the year. We finished, in our league, we finished 1-13 out of 14 games, which isn't very good. As these guys will tell you.
It's a great analysis.
It's unbelievable. But when we looked at the weights and heights of every team, we're on the bottom end. We averaged 165 pounds. When we went up against teams like Belmont Hill and Nobles, their guys are averaging 185 pounds. So we're giving up 20 pounds a man. It does correlate into wins and losses. It's all relative, and it's an issue we try to address in the off season.
We're drafting 18-year-olds. It's not like the NFL where you're drafting 22 or 23-year-old players. We're drafting 18-year-olds, and you got to project that boy into what he's going to be in a full contact sport. You know, this isn't baseball where the only issue the guy's going to have is maybe getting hit by a pitch once in a while, or maybe getting run over on a base path, you know, every 25 games. This is a full contact sport. Every time this player steps on the ice, he's vulnerable to being hit if he has the puck or has just released the puck. So there's a whole different set of characteristics we have to look for and evaluate in terms of bravery, willingness to play physically, willingness to accept physical challenges, fight if that's part of it, part of his background. So it's very different evaluating a player. Can I stand in there on a curveball and manage to hit it? It's almost a pure physical act. It's, you know, whether if I can physically do that. Now I got to know if this guy has the courage to go into certain buildings and play. Can he play hard in a Game 7 on the road? Can I trust him on the ice? It's very different psychology and skill set that we're trying to draft. We all place a premium on character. We all place a premium on bravery. But as you know, Pete just won a title. You got to have a lot of different skill sets on a team. It's like, you know, a guy comes to your house to fix a furnace. He doesn't bring one tool. He brings a toolbox. It's the same with a hockey team. You got to have a lot of different. You're going to play 4 series to win a cup. You got to beat 4 opponents. You want to finish them as quickly as you can because that reduces the war of attrition on your side, your conference. Boston, I think what was remarkable about their cup is they played 3 Game 7s. You know, the year we won, we lost 5 games in the playoffs. We went 16-5. We finished everyone off early, and we're waiting for the next opponent. So I think what Boston did was remarkable. But these are the things. This 18-year-old, and you go back, we've all drafted some really good players, and we've all made some horrible mistakes at the draft. But you go back and look at the one common denominator of the players that you drafted, whether it's Trevor Linden and then the Sedin twins, Chris Pronger, these guys all had character. All of these people are character people with a good work ethic, and that's the one thing I think that over time prevails.
Do you do an analysis, or do you have a psychological testing
Yes.
that goes with this, and is it extensive?
Yep. We do, we used to do, well, I told this story here a couple of years ago. Trevor Linden's draft year, we had the 2nd pick in the draft back in '88, and Mike Modano went first to the Minnesota North Stars. And we brought all the players in and did a psychological and physical battery of tests on these guys. Trevor was supposed to come in on Saturday. He called me Thursday night. He said, "Mr. Burke, it's Trevor Linden. I can't come on Saturday." And I said, "Well, Trevor, none of the players called me Mr. Burke. It's Berkey, and why can't you come on Saturday?" So my dad said I had to call you. "I can't come on Saturday." I said, "I know. You told me twice now you can't come. You told me your dad said to call. Why can't you come?" He said, "My uncle has a cattle ranch here in Medicine Hat, and Saturday's branding day. And my dad says I have to stay and help." So I said, "Well, what, you know, I'm a city boy. What's branding day?" He said, "Well, we have range cattle up here. We just let them roam in the woods in the wintertime. And we round them up. We have to brand all the calves, and we have to turn the young male cattle into steers." So I said, well, what's your job on branding day? He says, well, when the young cows come in the pen, I grab them by the neck and hold them down and pin them while we brand them and cut their nuts off. So I said, kid, you can skip the test. We didn't test Trevor, yeah.
See, and Trevor was great in Vancouver, and I traded for him, and he came to Long Island. He wasn't worth a shit.
I got him back, and he was still a good player. But Trevor Linden was a captain of our team. He was just a warrior, not a fighter, but high compete level, high hockey IQ, things that you might not see if you know, he did have size. He was a big kid. He could really skate for a big kid. But it's hard, you know, you look at the guys that we've drafted over the years that you think to yourself, this guy can't miss. He can't miss. He's big, he can skate, he's athletic, he's not afraid, he can't miss. And that same guy at the end of his 3-year entry-level contract, you don't ever see him again. He's a trivia question now. And we've all made those mistakes, huge mistakes at the draft.
Peter, have you ever received a phone call like that before the draft?
I was just trying to think. No, not quite that graphic.
But do you have a similar psychological test
Well,
you guys go through?
and we all do, and not the same one, but you know, we have Berkey talked earlier about the combines, and we have psychological testing, interviewing there. There's physical testing there, and then we bring in a certain select group, and we meet with them, and we have a sports psychologist that he meets with each of them for a couple hours, and you know, you think you know them, and you have a pretty good read, and over time you've gotten experience on how to get a read on the younger 18-year-olds, but it's tough. It's tough, and the physical testing that we do now at the combines is great, and we've soup to nuts. You do everything, but it's really hard to get a read on an 18-year-old, and they're well coached. We've got a prominent agent here that I'm sure we have more than just one, but that these guys are well coached, and you have to see through it. And it is about character. And for every first or second pick overall that doesn't make it, there's players that aren't drafted that find a way, and it's because of character. So it's a real hard part of the job, and we all have stories, not quite again as graphic as Berkey's, but of those players that show tremendous character, and it sticks in your head, and you can, you know, we all try and be progressive, but you got to put away the stats sometimes. When you get something like that, you know a kid's gonna.
Jaromir Jagr's draft year, I interviewed him in a hotel room in Prague, and one of the questions on our questionnaire was, have you ever been a captain? And if you're an elite player and you've never been a captain, that's a huge red flag. Like, there is no way you can be a top 5 rated pick and not have been a captain multiple times. So I said, has Jaromir ever been a captain? The translator translates, Jaromir says no. The translator turns to me and says, Jaromir says no. I said, no shit, I heard him say no. I didn't need the translator for that. I said, ask him why not. Blah, 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 blah. Because he's always played with players who were 3 years older than him. That's a great answer. I mean, we agonize over this in the US and Canada about playing a guy up 1 year. He played with players 3 years older than he was. He was never a captain. It was the best answer I ever got in a draft interview. It was awesome. We didn't get to draft him, though.
Can I interrupt and ask? So there's a whole body of research on this thing called league equivalencies, which is people have gone and looked at how someone does in Quebec Juniors and then what that projects to. For example, Quebec Juniors or the Swedish Elite League, and what that projects to in the NHL. Do you guys look at that?
I've reviewed that. I think it has very little value.
I've looked at it, and through experience, we know which leagues. There's ebb and flow with the leagues, like who's a stronger league, and you just know by talking to your scouts. I think if you go back, you can put values on leagues, but it changes. You know, it changes. Historically, certain leagues have always been stronger just by the population draw and all that, but it changes, and you got to be on top of which leagues are that are stronger. At the end of the day, you have to, you got to gather all your information, and you got to talk to your regional scouts who have an idea of where that player sits relative to other players. So Again, a piece of information that you look at, but you know, if your staff is good, you're going to know which leagues are stronger.
And the Quebec League stats are inflated because of the goaltenders, but, you know, from my perspective, that's why we scout live too, is we want to see how a player goes back to the bench and the coach chews him out. We want to see his body English. We want to see his reaction. Does he talk back to the coach? Does he slump? Does he talk to a teammate who just made a bonehead play when he comes back to the bench? Or does he bark at a teammate if he's a captain? We got to see all that. You can't see that on video. That's why we drag our butts to the rink to watch.
What's hard, I'm sure all you guys can attest to this, is high school players. Because the quality of high school play is so up and down, and it's hard to compare. It's tough to scout U.S. high school players. It really is.
Peter's got a player, Milan Lucic. Obviously, he's a good player. He's a good kid. His draft year, I went in to watch him. I was actually watching another player, but our scout said, well, watch this Lucic kid too. He's not bad. And I watched him, and he had such trouble skating. He was such a poor skater at that level, I thought. And I was wrong. I mean, he kind of lurches as a skater, but he eats up big strides. He takes a lot of ice away. It's like watching a great blue heron walk. He walks slowly, but he's covering a lot of ground. And I came back, I said, geez, I don't know if this guy can skate. Well, you watch him now, he skates pretty well. No one's ever going to make a video of him skating and show it to kids, but he gets around pretty good. And these are the things that are hard sometimes. You watch a guy, and you go in to see the guy live. There's a player that plays for the Flyers, Wayne Simmons. He played in Owen Sound. We had a player that we drafted there named Bobby Ryan when I was in Anaheim. And I went and watched Bobby Ryan play 8 times that year. And my assistant GM kept saying to me, you got to watch this Simmons kid. He's good. He's a good defensive player. He's mean. We got to try and get him.
Bird legs.
He did nothing against him. Nothing. 8 games. He didn't have a fight. I don't think he had a point. I'd be driving back from Owen Sound, and Bobby Murray would say, how was he? How was he? I'm like, he was terrible. This kid can't play. He didn't do anything. If you hadn't told me to watch for him, I wouldn't have known he was dressed. Then the next night, Bobby goes to see him, and he gets a Gordie Howe hat trick. He has a goal, assist, and a fight. And you watch him now, he's a pretty good player. But I never saw that. I watched him 8 times, and I didn't see anything where I got in the car afterwards and said, geez, I got to try and get that guy. And then there's other guys. Ryan Kessler, his draft year, I watched him play 1 shift at Ohio State. And I turned to our guys and said, I don't care where we have him, we're taking him. We're going to trade up, do whatever. I love this kid. 1 shift. Go figure.
So, Michael, I want to know, you're the one that crunches numbers more than anybody here on this podium. What numbers do you put the most validity in?
For what purpose? That would be my follow-up.
Well, evaluating a player. That's what.
Evaluating a player, I think hopefully you'll all stick around and watch. Brian McDonald's going to give a talk. It's one of the research papers here. It's a really nice job of doing an adjusted plus minus. So what it does is it takes all of the events that happen while a player's on the ice, and it adjusts it for who they're playing with and who they're playing against. And so what you come out of it with is essentially, how much is this player contributing to basically the expected or the probability of getting goals, adjusting for all those things, and adjusting for things like, where they start. Malhotra this year is starting 70% of his faceoffs in the defensive zone. We got to judge him differently than we're judging other players because of that.
Do you ever do anything or look at anything that incorporates when the player is being used?
In terms of
The time of the game.
the
When
time-
there's a lead, when there's a 1-goal lead, when there's a minute left, when.
in terms of sort of time relative to the start to finish of the game, no. We certainly do adjust things and do things differently. Brian's paper does it one way, I do it a different way. But you have Brian's paper is he does even strength and does a whole analysis there. He does shorthanded, a different analysis, power play, a different analysis. And so it accounts for that in that way.
I'm pretty sure I don't need to see his presentation to know that Manny Malhotra is good on faceoffs.
Manny Malhotra is good on faceoffs, but faceoffs are not worth very much. I mean, it is a possession game, but to
When
win
there's 10 seconds to
every
go,
face-offs
and it's
are really
2-1. Tell me a face-off's not important in your D zone when it's 2-1 and 10 seconds to go.
that it is important.
just said
I
it
will
wasn't.
agree. No. Long term, in terms of the probability of leading to a goal, right? That's what we're trying to get here. We're trying to get and prevent goals, right? Is that on average, you have to win 100 face-offs to get your team one goal.
I've seen a guy win one face-off and it led to a goal. Unfortunately,
I've seen that too.
unfortunately, I've seen it way too much lately.
Yeah.
Tony, as a former player, obviously recently removed from the game, most recently from this panel, how much did you look at your statistics on it? How much do players look at their statistics, analyze their statistics,
Well,
maybe lose sleep over their statistics?
They have to. That's how you get paid. And a lot of guys, that's how you get paid. Goals and assists. If you're a fighter, you're fighting, or whatever it is. If you're a D-man, obviously you're plus minus. Guys are looking at plus minus. Body checks, how many times they're making hits. So when you go in to talk to one of these guys at the end of the year, you need something concrete, something on the paper to say, all right, this is why I deserve X amount of dollars. Unfortunately, Berkey's probably a tough negotiator and throw you right out with a lot of those statistics and tell you you're horse shit, but there has to be
not to your
something,
face.
Corey. There has to be something there to, some kind of comparison.
Yeah, because when players go to arbitration, I mean, Peter, you know this well, and Brian knows it well, you're gauging your player against other players in that position in the league, correct?
Yeah,
And that arbitration is proof that statistics do lie.
yeah, unfortunately, the proliferation of statistics has resulted in the proliferation of, or the inflation of salaries too, I believe. And they don't all lie, Berkey, but I mean, there's so many of them, and you can twist them in a variety of ways that an arbitrator, an independent arbitrator that doesn't have the hockey acumen, doesn't see it right always. And that's, but that's an arbitration process that you go through, that if you can't negotiate a contract. So that we look upon that as a last resort dispute resolution method, but, I don't like them.
You go into arbitration, the union presents the player's case and identify comparables. So it totally discounts the intangibles the player provides. So they'll come into the arbitration and say our player is like these 5 guys whose average salary is $3.7 million. And you're looking at the list of 5 names and you're like, okay, I'll make you a deal right now. Let's take a timeout in the hearing. If you can trade this piece of garbage for any one of these 5 guys, you have authority to make the deal.
Should we go to arbitration?
That's why, and for every guy that the union brings, I'm sure you guys have 3 or 4 on the other end.
Oh, we're honest in the
You
whole
know.
thing.
So
It's very frustrating, but it is proof that statistics do lie. I can prove a player is a statistical twin of a guy who's twice the player he is because of the other things he provides.
And that goes back to making sure that you've got quality measures. And a lot of the measures you mentioned, plus minus before, are horseshit. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Thank you for bringing that word into the
Yeah.
conversation, by the way. Made
Among
the
others,
conversation
among
that
others.
much fun. Well, you look at the comparisons when you have a player like a Zach Parise who's unrestricted at the end of the season, and the media, I know you can't talk about it, but the media is quick to say Zach's going to get so-and-so money, or Zach's going to get, he's at least at $7 million. Mike, since I know they can't talk about Zach Parise, what would you say to that when you're looking at, when you've got an agent coming in and saying, well, Zach's unrestricted and he should be making what Sidney Crosby's making, or
Well, I'm
up
pretty
there.
much backing up the Brinks truck for this guy. And it goes not to his statistics, so he's not leading his team in scoring, but he brings you everything that you want in a player. He cares, he tries, he's skillful, but the stuff that you get excited about, that Brian and Peter, I think, are excited about, is the fact that you want this guy out there at every critical moment of every game that you possibly can have him out there, because you know he's going to make intelligent decisions, you know he's going to sacrifice himself, you know he's got the character to play with grace under pressure. And that is a difficult thing to analyze statistically.
Yeah, and you get, I could talk about Zach because of involvement with USA Hockey. There's a group of GMs, American GMs, that are involved with evaluating players for the World Championships that will be coming up this year in Sweden and Finland, and for Sochi, if the NHL goes to the Olympics in Sochi. So Paul Holmgren, Ray Shiro, Dean Lombardi. So we file reports on the players we play. We just played New Jersey, and the report I filed on Zach Parise to USA Hockey was a classic Parise game. Total effort, total concentration, all situations, good foot speed, high compete level, and rated him top rating for both teams as a candidate. So this is exactly, he's way better than the sum of his statistical analysis because of what else he brings. But there's a lot of guys like that. Not a lot of guys like Zach Parise, but on a team there are players whose value and whose contribution is not something you can identify statistically. You just can't. You know, these are guys that you know they're going to eat a puck in the third period or block a shot when it's time. They're going to do the right thing because they care, and they care about the result. And you think all pro athletes care about the result, but a lot of them don't care as much as others do. And they're not going to eat that puck. And when I say eat the puck, I mean freeze it. You're going to get drilled, but you need a face-off. They're going to freeze that puck, take the hit. And we're upstairs yelling, eat it, eat it, eat it. And some guys find a way to get that face-off, and some guys don't. Some guys find a way to block that shot, and some guys don't. So these are things that stats don't help us with. We got to go watch them play, and we got to make a value judgment. Does this player have the intangibles along with whatever physical things we can identify? And by the way, one of my favorite hockey players of all time is here, Angela Ruggiero. Hi, Angela.
What about, we've talked a lot about the player statistics. Another big statistic in the game is managing the salary cap. I would imagine that comes into huge play, Peter, especially when you look at recently coming off the trade deadline, how you're able to fit players into your cap, managing the draft picks that might be considered in exchanging for one player. How much is the salary cap analyzed, and do you have a team that does that for you?
I think it's overblown a bit, Captain, to tell you the truth. We're all, I think, relatively intelligent people that we can manage our own finances. And it's you know, I hate to say it, but it's similar to that, like your own personal finances. You can't spend too much now, and you can't spend too much in the future. So simply put, you got to watch where your dollars go. Now, there are instances when you're close to the cap. I don't know, where are you, Berkey, this year? Are you close? Are you?
No.
Not as many teams this year that are close to the cap because of where the cap is. Last year we were close to the cap, and you have to use your call-ups. You have to use your long-term injury reserve. You have to see where your tag room is, meaning what you can do for contracts with multiple years, subsequent years, and that's when you have to do a little bit of juggling. And last year we had to do some juggling. Last year we had to move something out before we did a trade with you for Cava. And so timing and management and knowing where you are in future years as far as committed dollars, and you have to kind of pull it all together. But this year not so much, but this year is more about future planning when we're making decisions and where we think the cap will be in future years, and what we think the system will be, and a little more uncertainty this year, and that's probably one of the reasons why there wasn't as much activity at the trade deadline.
I'm going to get to some of the questions I think that the audience has been tweeting in or texting in, or all of the above. Let's see if I can read your handwriting there, Zach.
I thought you said you did everything electronically here. You lied to all these people.
I think that was your daughter.
Where's my daughter? Where'd she go?
Okay, this is from the 508 area code. With prolonged injuries due to concussions, do you believe the league should implement harsher punishments of league-mandated equipment? Who wants to lead this off?
Well, first off, we can get rid of concussions in hockey. We can get rid of them all. We can eliminate hitting. And no one will watch. Like, people only pay to watch athletes do things that they can't do or are not willing to do. And the full contact part of our game has been an integral part of our game since we opened our doors 100 years ago and played this game. So everyone says, well, why doesn't Brendan Shanahan give 20 games for that? And that'll stop. If he gave 20 games for every headshot, it would stop. But the hitting would disappear too. So the tightrope that Brendan walks, and I used to do that job, so I know, is how do you penalize the behavior, but not penalize it so severely that a player is always wondering whether he should hit someone or not, because then the hitting goes, disappears. I think with concussions, the question was specifically about equipment. We are addressing that. The elbow pads have all been changed, so there's no hard plastic. They used to have hard plastic in there. We're in the process of getting all the shoulder pads converted, so there's no hard plastic. It's just soft foam caps. But once we do that, we're still going to have concussions. There's only 2 sports where there's no out of bounds: hockey and ring sports, like boxing, MMA. There's nowhere on a hockey rink where you're safe if you have the puck. You are liable to be hit anywhere on the rink if you have the puck. There's a reason for that. It's because we want players to get hit all over the ice. It's part of what we do. We'll never get concussions down to 0, but the harsher penalties to me is really an oversimplification from people who don't follow the game, where they say, we'll give 20 games for that. Yeah, we could do that. We can eliminate motorsports racing deaths. We can put regulators on all the carburetors at Indy, and they can drive 50 miles an hour, and no one will ever die in a car crash, and no one will watch. So we want to see people do things we can't do. Contact is part of our sport. It's a risk the players assume. It's part of why we all played. You know, if you don't want to be a contact sports guy, swim or golf. There's plenty of options for you as an athlete, but part of why I played is because I could hit people. And so, to me, we're always going to have concussions. We're addressing the equipment. It's a contact sport.
Anybody else want to chime in on that question?
I'll make a comment on statistics, which is we've seen the number of reported concussions go up in the last 4 years, and I think the consensus of analysis is that's really a reporting bias, that there's not actually a change in the game or a change in the number of concussions, but it is more people are aware, and therefore we're reporting them more often.
And more man games lost, because we're treating them properly.
Yep.
Michael, the next question
Well,
came in.
I don't want to leave that there, though, because I don't think it's just different reporting. And you got Sidney Crosby out for a year, Nathan Horton's out for how many games, Mark Savard's career has ended. There's a concussion issue. And how we deal with it is going to be interesting going forward, because I'm with Brian. We want contact, we want hitting, but somehow we haven't got to the root cause of this. Some people would call it epidemic. Some people, it's changed. It has changed. And we're going to have to, as the NHL is going to have to change with it to adjust for that, because the sheer, and I know that we're so cautious and more man games are lost because we are cautious about these things, but there is a real issue here with the number and the severity of these injuries, and I don't think anybody can deny that.
Well, I would take issue with that. The epidemic phrase to me is, I do think mostly it is that they're being, like, how many times do you get a concussion when you played? You played, either finished the game or played the next night.
I don't know.
I was telling Catherine this story the other night. I was playing high school football, and I drilled a guy. He went down and stayed down, and I went down and stayed down. It's in grade 10. So I walked to the sideline, and my head was ringing. Like they tell you, hear that they say my head was ringing. I couldn't hear, and I was holding both sides of my helmet. And the coach put his arm around me. He goes, "How you feeling, son?" I said, "Okay, coach." He goes, "Then why don't you go stand on your sideline?" I walked off the wrong side of the field. And I got shut down after that. But to me, I remember playing at Providence College, getting a concussion on the bench, and coach comes down 3 times. "Can you go?" "No." You puke on the bench. You can always tell when players do that because the guys on both sides move away. Comes back, the trainer gives you the ammonia, shake your head. He said, Lou Lamoriello was the coach. "Can you go?" "No, I can't go. I feel the fog hasn't lifted." Comes down again, your line's up, can you go? No, third time, yep. With a concussion, don't even know where you are. Ray Shiro tells a great story. When he was playing at St. Lawrence, he was playing at Providence College, and he got drilled in a game, and he went and sat on the PC bench. Sat on the opponent's bench. He got his bell rung, he didn't know where he was, and someone said, hey, kid. You know? So we used to play with these things, let alone play through them, play 2 days after. It was crazy. I think they're being reported properly and diagnosed properly, and that's, to me, explains the spike, for the most part, and the man games lost.
Well, they took out the red line a few years ago. They lifted obstruction rules, and all data from that point on changes for me. The whole game has changed. They made it a speed game. They eliminated obstruction and holding up defensemen, or holding up forwards on the forecheck, and have allowed players to become heat-seeking missiles, for lack of a better phrase. I don't think there's no more intent. I don't think the guys are tougher or more malicious, but the rules have conspired to make guys more vulnerable because people have speed, and with the increase in size, and we all have seen the size of the players increase, I think that has led to more violent collisions, which are causing further problems for us. And that has to, you talked about it. You have talked about, of all people, you've talked about the bear hug, where you could go in on the forecheck and grab a guy and pull him up, throw him up against the boards, as opposed to trying to separate his head from his shoulders, which I think would be a great adjustment, but nobody seems to be listening to you.
No, it's like many of my ideas. They're brilliant, but no one shares my enthusiasm for them. Feel like Cassandra. You all remember your ancient Greek mythology. Her gift was she could foretell the future, but her curse was that no one listened to her. So she foretold all these horrible things, and I had to watch them happen. That's what I feel like.
This is an interesting question that came in from 703, and I think a lot of people wonder, and maybe you guys wonder as well, but how has Detroit been able to be so consistently good? Do they look for different things that give them an edge, or are they just really good?
I think they've really mined the European players very well, and so they have that component of their scouting staff is very good. So that you see the Datsyuks, the Lidstroms, the Zetterbergs. These are all later round picks, and what they've also been able to do is, and I think a lot of teams have caught up to that. We've all seen we got to be better in Europe. But what they've also done is they've created a culture in their organization where the European player will come over and spend some time in the minors, and that's hard to do. And you've got these European players, when you draft them, they're playing in an elite league in Europe, and they're being paid well, and the league is really good. And they often think it's a step down to come over and play in the American League to learn their craft a little bit over in North America. And that's a struggle we have as managers, to convince European players to come over and spend some time in the American League. They've got a culture there where it's accepted. So, they've got, and we talked about those players with intangibles. All of their players, or most of their players, the Datsyuks, the Zetterbergs, the Holmstroms, the Lidstroms, all of their skilled players have like terrific character and win pucks and will take that hit to save a game. All of them. So they've done a real good job of. And then what happens is, in Berkey, I don't know if you know this, Mike, when you see these guys play. These guys protect the puck. They're so heavy on the puck. All of their players. They're 170-pound, 180-pound Datsuk. You can't get the puck off them. And I think that's a mentality. It's a culture thing that you have to be like that to play in the Red Wings organization. So I really look up to them.
A couple of grand slams on late picks that have, it's inured to their benefit for more than 10 years. And that's not luck. There's very little luck in sports with skill, but they haven't duplicated that success in the last 6 or 7 years. These are guys that they.
I think there is. They must be doing something differently, or they have a pretty good European staff, right?
Well,
we understand that, but if they were so good, why would they let Pavel Datsyuk go to the 6th round?
That's the myth. The myth is that they said, hey, there's this really good guy, but we can get him in the 6th round, and no one knows about him. What they said was, same as us, hey, let's take this Datsuk kid. Our guy in Russia likes him. It's not, you don't ever say, well, Nick Lidstrom's going to be a Hall of Famer, but let's wait and see if we can get him in the 6th round. So they drafted effectively. They haven't duplicated that success, though, Mike. What I was saying is, Kenny Holland is a genius, the GM there, I think. He's a brilliant guy. But they haven't had an impact player that late in the last 7 or 8 years. So they hit it out of the park on Datsuk and Franson and Zetterberg, all later picks. But they haven't had that same success. That train is going to hit the end of the track at some point.
At some point, but do you agree with me? Do you guys agree with me that when you play Detroit, I mean, these guys, whatever player it is, these guys, they protect the puck. They're heavy on the puck, better than all the rest of us.
And they're the most patient team in the league when they have the puck. They'll pass it D to D 7 times until they get something they like. Mike Babcock's a good coach, but Kenny Holland in the post-cap era has 1 ring, same as you. They've won it once since the salary cap came in, same as the Boston Bruins.
I'll just echo the point in terms of analysis is that statistical analytics have basically decided that hockey is a possession game. And that the more you possess the puck, the more shots you're going to get, which is going to lead to more goals. And so I think Peter's point of Detroit being a team that stays on the puck and makes good decisions when they have the puck is crucial.
And winning faceoffs to get the puck is good.
If you can get hundreds of them, sure.
Next question. Did you want to chime in?
Nope, I'm good, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks for thinking of me,
shocked,
though.
but
I was really happy about 10 minutes ago when your mic fell off, but I see you put it back on.
I thought he was going to chime in on the Yager comments, but he stayed away from that this time. 781, do you incorporate replacement player analysis into personnel decisions?
Yeah, of course you do. Sure. Like if you have, well, on a couple of different levels. If one of your players is, you have to decide whether to sign them short term or long term. Just sign them in general. You have to know what your substitute players, what your replacement players. Where are you in your pipeline? Who's coming ready to inherit that role, and what will they bring? And can you tolerate the learning period until they can come up to speed? How can you tolerate the learning period with your other players? So that there's a whole host of questions that you go through. And then, of course, that's in your pipeline versus what's available in the free agent pool. And what's a common, we always hear of fans and commentators, and not so much you, Mike, but about this team should go and get this guy in the free agent market. Well, it's really hard to know that you're going to get a player in the free agent market. Like there's 29 other teams that are bidding for that player. So yes, we think about replacement players. We think about the replacement player pools, how big they are and how available they are. And even on the trade level we do also, of course.
Your depth chart, I would agree with that. Your depth chart, what you want to have is, you want to have players, we're allowed to have 50 players under contract, each NHL team. And if you own your own farm team, that's a problematic number. We own our own farm team, so you have 23, say you're carrying, maybe a couple guys hurt, then you got 22 or 23 more at the American Hockey League level, and maybe 4 or 5 guys that are signed in the East Coast League. What you want to have is a recall that fills each role on your team. So your leading scorer on the Toronto Marlies, our American League team, may not be the player we recall if a third-line winger gets hurt. We're going to bring up someone who can check. We're going to bring up someone who's good at that particular job. But you want skill replacements for injuries. You want grit replacements for injuries. Maybe a guy that scraps a little bit. Same with the defense. If you lose a mobile defenseman, you're going to bring up a skill guy. If you lose a stay-at-home guy, you're going to bring up a stay-at-home guy. So what you try to have, everyone wants to have on their depth chart with Pete with Providence Bruins, is all types of replacement players for guys that get banged up that can come up and do a job. Where are they in their development? Is it going to mess this player's head up to recall him if he's a first-year pro?
Catherine, could I just chime in? Because I think that the question gets at, replacement player value, which is a big concept in baseball and some other sports. And I think we're just starting in hockey to be able to have the analytics to be able to say, what is basically what I'm going to get out of an average player that you might pull up, notwithstanding some of the criteria that Brian are looking for.
So we have those meetings, like you saw in Moneyball, when the scouts are all around, and I don't know about you guys, Berkey, but we don't throw the names on the whiteboard. Did you see Moneyball?
No.
Okay. They have, I got that feeling when I saw that look on your face. But we have the lists the same way in Moneyball, you have the lists of players who are going to replace, who are the players in Moneyball that they had to replace the,
Just keep going.
Hatterberg,
Damon was one of them.
Let me interrupt. I'll tell you the thing that I like about Moneyball, and I would recommend that everyone read it. First off, Michael Lewis is a brilliant writer. It's a great read, and it's an interesting read. What I love and admire about Moneyball is anyone been in the Louvre, and you look at the Mona Lisa, right? Everyone stands in front of it, looks at it. And these guys said, we're going to stand over here and look at it. I love the fact that they said, we're going to do it differently. I love the innovation part of it. Where it breaks down is, no one's won a title with Moneyball. Like, win something and then write the book. Like, so what am I going to learn reading Moneyball? How to be decent? How to be good? When I read a book, a sports book, I want someone to tell me how to be great. And that's what aggravates me is, if it was something that it's still worth reading, it's still worth it, but God damn it, there's more to this than looking at statistics and picking players' names out of a goddamn hat.
thanks, Berkey.
How do you feel about that, Michael?
I would agree that the statistics by themselves have to be taken in context. They have to be evaluated. You have to do all of those other things that you're going to do in terms of making sure you're getting a player of character and a player who's going to give you effort and all of those things. At the same time, right, playoffs in baseball is a small sample size event, and you're going to have, some chance events, and you're going to get lucky and unlucky. And I think, winning whatever they want, 104 games, really is doing something. Is it winning the great prize? No.
Have a parade, then call me.
But how often did they do it? They did it once? I mean, last I looked, Oakland sucked.
But Oakland, for several years, was doing it. I mean, the book steps in.
They were good.
They were good.
Great.
But you know what? They were handicapped. They're going against the Yankees, who are.
If all you want to be in sports is good, you're going to get your ass kicked. Someone who wants to be great is going to kick your ass. That's the same thing. It's like we were talking about this, Katie, was it 3 years ago? You can't like hockey if you're a hockey player. You got to love hockey. The game's too hard. It's the same thing. If you just want to be good, you just want to get 10 years in as a GM and be good, you're going to get your ass kicked. Have a parade, get a ring, and then write a book.
All right, on that, I think we're out of time. No? It's a good way to end it, though. So, Michael, Brian, Tony, Peter, and Mike, thanks so much. And thank all of you for texting and tweeting in your questions, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.